So thank you very much, everyone joining. My name is Sean McCann. I am one of the support engineering managers here at GitLab. Currently, I am looking after those team members in support engineering that are based in APEC. I recently had the opportunity to partake in the CEO Sadow program. So this is an initiative which has been run since the beginning of last year, 2019, with the view of allowing people to get a more holistic view of what is happening within the business. You spend 2 weeks with the CEO. You go to all of the same meetings that he goes to, whether that is a one-on-one with his direct reports, whether it is a media briefing with any of the media outlets that occasionally do interviews with him, investor calls, board meetings, you name it, you attend as well. It's a fantastic opportunity to really get an understanding of how the business is run here at GitLab, the way that the executives engage with each other, and also really to understand how, as a manager, what role I play impacts the rest of the business and how the rest of the business can impact my role and also the team that I help to support and look after. So with that, because this is a bit of an AMA, we do have a doc with a whole bunch of questions that have been put in there. And in the best of GitLab fashion, I'm going to ask those people that have added questions to verbalize them so I can answer. So let's start with you.
Okay, so I have the first question. This is Greg from support. What lessons or insights did you take away from the CEO Sadow experience? And was there anything you learned that you feel is particularly valuable or relevant to support?
Thanks for the question. Good question. My whole time in the Sadow program, I was constantly amazed by the level of detail that all of the executives that are running GitLab, the company, are able to dive into. Something that I feel they did very, very well was being able to switch from one function to another. As an example of that, I was involved with conversations between our CEO and our CRO, who's our Chief Revenue Officer, who heads our sales organizations. But they didn't necessarily only talk about sales. They were able to do deep dives into other areas of the business as well and understand how certain decisions would affect their functions as well as others. One of the insights that I got specific to support was, like a lot of organizations, support is not necessarily the most visible component, but it's definitely felt by customers and it's definitely valued by those members of the wider GitLab team that are positioning GitLab and why it is such a good product to use and what kind of additional services and support they can expect from us. There was definitely a sense of support that we do is not just for our paying customers. There's definitely a level of support that we offer to other members of GitLab. One of the examples that's come out, everyone's aware that we have a list of 32 efficiency improvements that are being focused on very heavily by the executives. And support plays a part in that. And that is very much how can we support the sales teams to do what they do best, which is sell, instead of getting pulled into an area that we probably do better in, which is understanding technical challenges of customers and issues that they run into and how to help them through that. So by taking away those conversations and allowing the sales team to do what they do best, that's going to drive growth, which obviously is something that we all care about, because as a company, we want to keep growing. We want to keep bringing in new customers, and we want to continue to grow the customers that we already have. Support is a critical component of growing those customers, because if a customer who is experiencing problems is unable to solve those problems, they're going to look at another product set. Thanks for the question, Greg. Any follow-up questions on that before we move on to the next person?
No, thank you.
Cool, no worries. Anton, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Anton and I'm a support engineer in APEC. And my question to you, Sean, is I imagine a that a day for Sid must run like clockwork, you know, in and out and things get done. And could you just give us a quick overview in your own words on an average day for Sid?
I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, who's got a follow-up question, and I'll try and combine my answer to address both. Andrew?
Yeah, hi, my name is Andrew from support engineer in APEC as well. Yeah, it's just additional question. How intense is the day? Like you have back-to-back meetings, no time to rest, and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, thanks.
Great questions. There was a bit of a joke that we had in one of the calls that Sid had, where he announced that we're going to be getting a chief of staff who's going to be joining us soon. And someone asked, so Sid, what are you going to do with all the free time that you have with the chief of staff coming on and taking over some of these responsibilities? And there were a number of people on the call who literally laughed out loud because there's always more GitLab to GitLab. Like there's always something else to do. There is no such thing as free time. In terms of running like clockwork, I have to give full credit to the EBA team, the executive business assistants. They do a phenomenal job of lining up the calendars of not just the CEO, but of all of the execs. They have a huge amount of focus on making any time available in the day as effective, as efficient, as valuable as possible. So as a CEO Shadow, I found myself frequently during the day reaching out to the EBA team to say, hey, this meeting's been moved, we're overrunning on this one is no longer going to happen. And there were constantly slots that were being filled and things that were being moved around. So there is a level of chaos, but I think organized chaos is probably a good description. It does work like clockwork, but that is because there is, like a clock, so many different people that are actively working together to make sure that all of the time that the execs have in the day is as productive and is as beneficial as possible. It's pretty full on. My time as a CEO Shadow was slightly unusual for 3 events that occurred while I was doing it. One was my first 2 days were 2 days of investor conferences. So we were at a hotel where every 30 minutes, a different investor was coming to talk to the CEO, the CFO, who's the chief financial officer, and our senior director for investor relations. So a lot of those conversations were with current investors and potential future investors, which is slightly unusual. There was also the board meeting that happened at the same time. That happens once a quarter. So I was very fortunate enough to be able to experience the board meeting itself and all the prep work that has to go in before the actual meeting of the board, and then the day, because it's an entire day that meeting runs for. I was fortunate enough to actually witness what that looks like. And then obviously with current events, everything that's happening with COVID-19, that really started to hit while I was shadowing Sid. So it's the time sink for the CEO is always severe. The details of what it is are what change. A typical day will be starting off with a couple of phone calls in the morning. He does an amazing job of staying in contact with his family. He has calls scheduled with his family, wherever they may be in the morning. There's a number of company calls that he then sits in on. Some meetings are very well prepared and very well planned ahead of time. Some are very last minute. It is pretty full on. To go into Andrew's question that he's got about that in terms of just how intense it is, it's very intense. You don't often have a lot of time. You often find yourself with literally 5 minutes between meetings where you do have a bit of a break. And that was one of the surprising things, is just how well the CEO and the rest of the executive team handle such an extreme amount of context switching from one thing to the other. We did joke a little bit that as shadows, we managed to get lunch 3 days in a row. It was a little bit tongue in cheek, but it is literally that intense where sometimes you don't have 30 minutes to step outside of mission control, get something to eat and to have it. So it is definitely full on. Anton, you've got the next question again.
Can I ask a follow-up question of them?
Sure.
So that's during the day. What's happening, when you wind up during the day and towards the evening time?
So something that I think pretty much everyone at GitLab is aware of, and anyone that isn't familiar with the way that we work at GitLab might want to go and have a look through our handbook. There's a huge focus on making sure that there is work-life balance. Sid is very, very good at making sure that he's not working too long. He does catch himself occasionally going, it's 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. I need to slow down a little bit because it could set a bad example for other people in the business. You do get to the end of the day and you're ready for a break. There were a couple of times when, full transparency, I went back to the apartment that I was staying in and I did a little bit of extra work, but that was my choice. And it's because I felt that I wanted to get something done, not that there was an expectation that I needed to get something done. Having those set hours, I think, also helps structure a day and keeps it sustainable for Sid being the CEO. Because I think it's very easy to work every hour of the day, but you can't keep doing that long term. And I know that not just the CEO, but the entire executive team are truly invested in the success of GitLab. Part of that means that they need to be able to sustain themselves and their efforts, but they also know that they need to set the right example for the rest of the team members globally, in terms of how we want people to manage their time while they're working at GitLab. We don't want people working every hour. We don't want people working 100-hour week, 12-hour days. That's just going to lead to burnout, and it's definitely not what we want to do. So it was very well managed. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yeah, it does. It's good to hear that. That's kind of part of the, they consciously think about slowing down and everything. But there will be times where, like, especially when you're in this sort of circle, you have like dinner parties and stuff like that to go to and things like that, right? So that's part of the job too, right? That's
absolutely is. Yeah. So while I was there when the board meeting was taking place, I got to attend a board dinner, which was the night before. And while there definitely was some talk around business that happened during the dinner, it was also balanced with the knowledge that relationships needed to be built. And you only build relationships through talking to people and just being yourself. And that was also something that it was a little bit surprising to me, but it was great to actually see in action, which is we're talking about a group of individuals who are immensely successful in business. They've got decades worth of combined experience and knowledge, and they totally understand the human elements of conducting a business, especially in the modern age. And they understand you can't be all about business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there was a definite desire to engage with each other just as people. And I think that also is reflected back into GitLab a lot as well. Because I think pretty much anyone that's had any kind of interaction with any of the execs knows that more often than not, the first question that they're going to ask you is, how are you doing? And they're not doing that because it's scripted. They're doing it because they genuinely care. And seeing that reflected in the more informal conversations that happen as well is great. Of course, they are deeply passionate and focused on making sure that GitLab is successful as a business. So if they have an opportunity to talk about business and it's relevant and it's timely, they're going to talk about it. But it's not a case of business at the expense of everything else.
Thanks, Sean.
Anton, do you want to go for the next question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sean. So, I imagine that you would have gone into the Shadow program with some expectations on what you would learn, what you would take from it. And I was just curious, what was the biggest surprise for you in terms of what you expected to experience versus what you actually experienced?
Good question. I've been fortunate enough that I've had some exposure to senior leadership teams in other companies that I've been with, but I've never been given such a level of access as what I was given during the Shadow program. One of the things I was expecting to see is how do the various executives that are responsible for areas of the business and functions of the business interact with each other. I probably wasn't prepared to see how much they support each other. That was surprising to me. Where I think a lot of businesses tend to focus only on the results, and it's results at all costs. Every single conversation that I got to observe, results were definitely a part of that conversation, but the rest of our values were very, very present as well. Transparency is constantly brought up. I truly believe that we are working for one of the most transparent companies that exists. I don't know many other companies as transparent as we are. Iteration was brought up constantly as well. Seeing just how deeply embedded it is really helped me to understand what I can do in my role to actually live up to that value more. Because I don't think that I iterate as often as I probably should, especially when I see just the pace of iteration that the executives maintain on a day-to-day basis. We often talk about the values at GitLab and about how they're more than just a bunch of words on the website. Seeing them in action and seeing them called out, explicitly called out in conversations, was surprising, although it probably shouldn't have been as surprising as it was. But it's also really comforting, because I know that those are definitely our guiding principles. And as long as our behaviors are reflecting the values that we have, we're going to be on the right track. And then I think just seeing the way that the executives were engaging with each other, and the level of comfort they also had having shadows being, a part of some of these conversations, that was surprising. There were a couple of times where there were conversations that were being had that I will probably never have in my career outside of those 2 weeks that I spent as a CEO Shadow, unless I happen to become an executive myself in a company one day. And that, if anything, just reinforced not only the commitment of the executives, but also the benefit that is seen for having the Shadow program. And it's one of the reasons that I encourage everyone, if you're able to take part in the Shadow program, do it. It'll give you a newfound appreciation, not just for GitLab, the company, but just for the amount of work and effort that goes into it, from the very, very top, the most senior positions in the company, and actually see that reflected all the way down to every single individual contributor, wherever they may be.
Cool, thanks, Sean.
And I think you've got the next one as well. Do you want to ask that one?
Oh yeah, sure. This is more a lighthearted question. Did you, by any chance, get any inside scoop on if Contribute might be in APEC in the future?
So this is something that I constantly bring up as well, because I would love it to be in APEC at some point in time. As everyone now knows, Contribute this year has been cancelled because of world events. Obviously, we have no idea how long the current state of affairs is going to last for. So it seemed the best thing to do to cancel it. I know that there is a lot of discussion happening and a lot of thought being given to what needs to happen with Contribute in the future. As a company, we're still roughly doubling in size every year. We're now at 1,200 people. This time next year, we're probably going to be 2,000 plus people. It starts to become logistically more and more difficult to get that many people together at the same time in one location. This year, Contribute was going to have to span 2 hotels, and that took a lot of work just to try and find a city with 2 hotels for over 1,000 people relatively close together. As we keep growing, you can imagine how logistically difficult that's going to become. I do know that one of the trains of thought that's being investigated is, do we maybe want to have some kind of functional split where different teams in different areas get together? Do we want to make it regional? I don't think any decision has been made. I'm confident to say no decision has been made, because I think all of us would know, based on our value of transparency and how quickly these types of things are pushed out there. I do think Contribute is going to be substantially different moving forward. But in the, in the best spirit of iteration, that's a good thing. We can figure out what has worked well and what can be replicated, and we can go focus on what hasn't been working well or wouldn't work as we continue to scale and find a better way of doing it. So it's a very long-winded way of saying maybe, but it won't be contribute as you know it.
That's cool. I think it's just worth asking. But thank you.
You're welcome. The next question is from Donique, who is based in EMEA. Auntie, would you be willing to vocalize that for her?
Yeah. So my name is Artie, and I'm in support engineering in applications focus in AIMER. So I just want to vocalize the questions that Donique has asked, and she's not here. So her first question is, can you describe the vibe of being in the office, like a CEO office, and being a shadow in 3 words?
This was really difficult because I tend to be quite verbose at the best of times. So trying to cut it down to 3 words is really tough, and trying to find the right 3 words is difficult. So I'm going to have a crack at this. I would say intense, insightful, and bizarrely fun. Intense because there's a lot happening. Like you can feel the energy that is brought by all of the execs, not just the CEO, in every conversation. Insightful because you get to see things in the business that normally you wouldn't see in your day-to-day role, and starting to have those connections explained to you and seeing them pop up is really, really interesting. And fun because I'm a little bit of a magpie. I like focusing on the new shiny thing, and being a CEO shadow, being exposed to all areas of the business, everything is a new shiny thing, and you're constantly jumping from one thing to another. And being able to do that and actually be welcomed into that, and being encouraged to ask questions and understand context, and if you have something that you want to contribute as well, that left me leaving mission control at the end of every day just with a bit of a buzz. It was just a fun time to have. Can you vocalize the next one from Donique?
Yeah, thanks. So Donique had another question, and I'm just looking at the time here. I know we're pretty much at time. I don't know whether others or whether you have time to continue. We do have some more questions in the doc. So we'll see how it goes. But she wanted to know, what did you think of the city?
I really liked it. It's my 3rd time to San Francisco. The 2 previous times that I'd only been there for 3 days, which is a long way to go for 3 days considering I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I thought it was amazing. It was also a little bit surreal watching it go into lockdown in my 2nd week, but it's definitely a place that I want to visit again. And again, as an opportunity to take part in the Shadow program, it's an added benefit for anyone that either is not in the continental US or who has never been to the West Coast. It was really cool.
Okay, so one more from Donique. Were you intimidated by anything? And was there anything you particularly enjoyed?
Short answer is yes and yes. While we try very hard at GitLab not to rely on structural or hierarchical power, I was very, very aware that I was engaging with not only the senior leadership of the business, but also with the board of directors, who are, as I was saying earlier, incredibly successful individuals with decades worth of experience working at the most senior levels that you can imagine in some truly global, high performing, highly successful companies as well. I think it's intimidating for anyone. Also, Sid, as our CEO, he can come across as being quite serious. And it took a little while to kind of be comfortable in myself that that's just how he is. He's not actually upset or angry or super serious. And he'll let you know if he is. It took a little while for me to become comfortable to go, is that a is that a directive or is that a suggestion? Like, is that something you want me to do right now, or is that just something that you think we should think about? I think 2 weeks is a great opportunity to make sure that you can get over that intimidation, which is good. But it's definitely something I think everyone that took part in the shadow program at some point will feel. And the second part of that question being, was there anything you particularly enjoyed? It's really difficult for me to pin it onto one thing. I think the entire experience was fantastic. I would do it again in a heartbeat. All of the stress that I felt going into it, all of the anxiety that I felt about, am I going to be able to take notes quickly enough, and am I going to be able to not get in anyone's way? I would do it in a heartbeat. And like I've said, I encourage anyone in the company that's even vaguely interested in doing it to do it. We have 2 more questions, one of which is from Adam, who is not able to join the call. Someone willing to vocalize Adam's question?
Yeah, I can do that.
I can.
Alex, go, Alex.
Oh, cool. Okay, Andrew. Right, Alex, also a support engineer from APEC. There's a question from Adam, another support engineer from APEC. His question is, it must have been unique shadowing the CEO during the world events. Can you describe how these events affected your shadow experience and anything that you learned which you didn't expect?
It's a really good question. Obviously really topical, really timely. The effect on the shadow experience was more in terms of seeing, as curveballs like this get thrown at a team, as you are put into a situation where plans need to change, whether it's not able to meet with that person because they can't travel, or an event is canceled, or whatever the case may be, how quickly the CEO and the exec team as a whole are able to readjust what their plans are and figure out the most effective way of doing that. That was a little bit surprising at just how good they are at being able to pivot. I think there's a lot of businesses that we've seen through friends and family who are not able to make that adjustment. They find it quite hard. I think that speaks a lot to our values, especially iteration, where I think we're quite used to going, if we need to change something, let's just change it. And if it's wrong, that's okay, because we don't have to pin everything on a single change. We'll just do lots of little changes and keep working our way towards that. In terms of what did I learn that I didn't expect to learn from that, I think the biggest lesson there was how well we've been able to position ourselves as a company to actually respond to these types of changes. I think of the fact that we're fully remote. I think more and more companies are going to start to seriously consider it moving forward because of current world events. I think of some of the planning that has gone in for the next 3 to 5 years, and I think there's always the ability to adjust as needed when events like this happen, and that's really, really comforting to see, knowing that we've got people leading the business that are able to have that level of adjustment as needed for things that they maybe haven't been able to think about. But at the same time, really focused on the plans that they do have, really well thought out, with the knowledge that things may happen that can derail it. That was really interesting. We are at time. There is only one more question though. Greg unfortunately had to drop for dinner. So I'll vocalize Greg's last question, answer it, and then we'll wrap up there. So Greg asked, I invited CEO Shadows to my coffee chat with Sid, and I really enjoyed the experience. What was it like for you and Lean, who was the other shadow that I was with in my second week, to shadow this coffee chat, which focused heavily on support? And would you encourage others to invite and include CEO shadows in one-on-one meetings with our CEO? I would say short answer, again, yes, definitely invite the shadows. We tend to be active observers in those conversations. We were in the one-on-ones between the CEO and all of his direct reports as well. only dropping if there was something particularly sensitive that needed to be discussed. So there was absolutely no hesitation joining that. I really enjoyed seeing it for two reasons. One, seeing Sid's ability to have conversations across the spectrum and in varying levels of detail. He's able to go really deep into the weeds on a particular topic. And in the next meeting, suddenly he's talking about broad level strategy that's going to be focusing for the next 2 to 3 years on a specific area. And watching him actively get better at having different discussions with different people was also great to see. Him actually getting feedback from one conversation and seeing him enacting that feedback in the next is amazing. Like, it's very few people, I think, are able to adapt that quickly to feedback that's coming on. I think in general, people are hesitant to schedule time with Sid to have a one-on-one as a coffee chat. He really enjoys them. I think people are worried about wasting his time or taking up time that he could be spending somewhere else. Because of how amazing the EBA team are, they will find time that works. So my advice to people would be, don't feel like you could be distracting him or taking time that should be spent on somewhere else or anything like that. Definitely get some time scheduled with him. If you can go in with a document with your questions pre-populated, that helps him because he can think about things a little bit before diving into it. I think he also finds it encouraging to see people where their head goes and understanding the types of questions that they want to ask. But definitely get some time with him or with any of the execs for that matter. Definitely say that the shadows can join. It's a great experience for them. I love sort of watching some of those dynamics play out and watching some of the conversations. But I also think it's great for people to talk about things after that one-on-one as well, between whoever the person was and the shadows, just because it helps you give you more perspectives on things, which I think is pretty cool. I know that we're over time, but I'm gonna quickly open it up just in case anyone has one final question that they want to ask before we end the AMA here, and I can post it up to YouTube. Everyone looks about questioned out. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the questions in the doc. For those that haven't been able to attend but still ask questions, thank you as well. I'll make sure that we post this video on Unfiltered and share it with the team. Closing thoughts, the CEO Shadow program is phenomenal. Like, I cannot speak highly enough about it. If you're interested in it, sign up, try get onto the rotation. Like, it's definitely something that you will find benefit in. I've thanked the execs in our Fangs channel on Slack, but I want to do it again publicly. Thank you for the level of trust that you've displayed with the shadows and allowing us to come into some of the conversations that you have, and the patience that you show having people from very, very different perspectives and frames of reference to engage in some of the conversations that you have. It's been a fantastic opportunity, and like I said, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Thank you all. Stay safe. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to hit me up on Slack. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks.